Hello and welcome back to the Faith and Culture Show. I'm Catherine Camp, your hostess for the show. Today, I do feel very honored to be speaking with Dr. Bill Adams. He is the Senior National Representative for Bridges for Peace. As Senior National Representative, Bill assists in the development and growth of bridges within the state of Florida, as well as national efforts. Through his rich biblical teaching, he brings a greater awareness to the importance of what God is doing in Israel today, as well as the extensive humanitarian outreach of Bridges through its assistance centers in Jerusalem and Carmel. He is widely known as a trusted bridge builder within the Jewish community and an advocate for Israel among the churches. Bill earned his Master's of Divinity from Mid-America Baptist Theological Seminary and received his MA in Judeo-Christian Synergism and his Doctorate of Divinity from Masters International University of Divinity. His undergraduate degree is from the United States Military Academy at West Point. That's a big deal. Bill is a graduate of BFP Institute of Israel Studies. He and his wife, Lizzie, have 7 children, 14 grandchildren, and reside in Rockledge, Florida. He's a busy man. He just returned from overseas, and so I feel honored that he would pick this day, the day after, with jet lag and everything, to come on the show and get to know us, and so that we can get to know him a lot better. We know that we need to build bridges, and Israel should be very special for the Christian community. So I'm real excited to bring him on the show. Welcome to the Faith and Culture Show, Dr. Adams. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate the invitation very much, and God bless all who are joining us.
Well, I'm just following. I feel what God's calling me to do, and I trust that whoever's watching at any given time is who's supposed to be watching or not watching. So I know that the introduction that I've given is probably very brief. If there's anything else you'd like to tell us about yourself, please fill us in and let us know, how did you get involved with Bridges for Peace?
Well, the only thing to update on that bio is there's 17 grandchildren now. We only got up to 14 on that. And a few of them were just in the house, so they were supposed to be leaving so they don't make noise while Grandpa is on a program. But if they suddenly make some noise, you'll know why. But Bridges for Peace, yes, my wife and I started to get this stirring, this calling. At first, I just thought it was maybe an interest, kind of a side interest about Israel. It's very much from the Bible. That's really where we were getting it. And then circumstances, what God was weaving in our life, time with the Army in Germany, where I was visiting concentration camps, things like that were causing us to wonder about the Jewish people and what is going on. And we started to search out ministries that are serving in some way Israel and the Jewish people. And there's a lot of wonderful works out there. And just as we were searching, and this was pre-internet, this was like the early 90s, we were writing off to things and finding out. Well, one of them we connected to was Bridges for Peace. And there's a long story of how God made sure we met Bridges for Peace, because Bridges for Peace is very relational. You tend to meet Bridges person to person. We just don't advertise. And it's growing around the world out of Jerusalem by person-to-person connectivity. It's very grassroots. And so that happened to us in Albany, New York. And my wife was handed the Dispatch from Jerusalem magazine. It looks like this today, by the way. So a version of this was more like a newspaper at the time in the early 90s. This was handed to my wife. And, the stories in it, the news, I'm actually a contributor to this now. But those were all interesting. But the part that really captured my heart was in the back here, was how you can bless Israel practically, because Bridges for Peace for about 50 years now has been meeting the needs of needy Israelis right on the ground, right where they are, community to community. And that is what God had put on our hearts. We didn't know it. Couldn't articulate it. So next thing you know, we're praying for this ministry. We're giving. And next thing after that, we're going to Israel on a pastor's tour. I was a pastor at the time in Albany, New York, and off we went with Bridges for Peace, and the rest is history because I began volunteering and then coming on the team with Bridges by the early 2000s.
Wow. I had not, to be honest, I had not heard of it until Don Blake at Virginia Christian Association told me about you all and suggested that I chat with you. And I'm just glad to know that you all are out there. So now the magazine that you just showed us, is that a Bridges for Peace magazine?
That's right. That's the primary publication of Bridges for Peace. It's a bi-monthly news and views magazine. It even has recipes in it from Israel. So it's a broad-ranging, encouraging connection to Israel, the people of Israel, and also particularly what is God doing in Israel.
Wow.
And so with an update every 2 months, that's a pretty good source. I would really recommend people. They can find it right online. We'll just go ahead and say Bridges for Peace. If you remember that name, .com is where you can find these resources. And of course, you could then subscribe to have things mailed to you as well.
I think that's great. In fact, it's good to know someone like you that works there, that represents them actually, because I just don't know who to trust. I see a lot of commercials on these off channels that promote giving money to the poor widows in different parts of the world who are Jewish. And sometimes I wonder, are these real people? How much money that if I send $50, how much of that actually gets to those people in the way of food, and what are they getting and how often are they getting it? So can you fill us in how Bridges for Peace works so that we can become more familiar? And I want people to feel comfortable about going to bridgesforpeace.com and beginning to give money if that's what God puts on your heart, or to get involved.
Sure. I appreciate you doing this right up front, because sometimes we'll talk about all the issues, of which there are so many, and maybe at the end we'll end up having an opportunity. And I'm not here to sell anything, you know that. I don't need to try to get people to do anything. God puts it on people's hearts just like he did ours, and they're just looking for the way that they can connect and then give or go. And that's another thing. We send volunteers to Israel. That's one of our greatest things to ask for is, who wants to volunteer. But on the giving side of thing, we're glad to say Bridges for Peace is one of the top rated for financial accountability ministries that you'll ever find out there. GuideStar and other ways. And there are ways to find out about any ministry. The one thing we do is we don't put any significant dollars into advertising. So as I mentioned before, you've not heard of Bridges, kind of like everybody's heard of Coca-Cola, whether you like it or not. You know it because they advertise. They spend a huge percentage of their profits on advertising. Just from the very beginning, Bridges for Peace said, "Well, let's not do that. Let's just see if God will grow this," and He has. We now have 9 national offices around the world. This ministry grew in the past 6 decades out of Jerusalem, where it started, to be all around the world without advertising. We are the largest boots on the ground evangelical Christian ministry in Israel. We run one of the largest food banks in all of Israel. It's actually the first food bank. Christians, Bridges for Peace, started the idea of a food bank in Israel. So see, we don't have to boast beyond that. We're just saying God has established a work. The roots have gone deep, and they've spread, the branches, you might say, spread all over the world. And we're pleased that they somewhere right around 90% of all dollars given by a donor, let's say here in the U.S., where we are, that 90% is going to get to Israel. And it's going to be multiplied from there to be worth more than the 100% that was given back in the States, because we work in currency exchanges and we work in purchasing what we give on the economy of Israel, which also is helping the businesses of Israel. and then we're able to distribute to the point of need at a value greater than if the person had had to buy it themselves. That's why we could say we're something over 100% value of what's given, and we just need to keep about that 10% for operating expenses, because you just don't run a ministry for nothing. But
Right.
we keep an extremely low overhead, so that that vast majority of the donation can get to the point of need and be multiplied there in Israel.
And you know, the Bible does tell us, he says that he will bless those who bless Israel, but he will also curse those who curse Israel. And we have had a lot of cursing Israel in the United States, in particularly. And I can only speak for the United States because that's where I live. And I think it's shameful what has happened here in the past year. The only way I can explain it is massive spiritual warfare against the people of Israel, with there's not even a reason to hate, other than people are being lied to on the media, and stories are getting distorted, and it's always against Israel. Would you like to address that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's such a huge topic. I think I would just say that there is a false narrative that's perpetuated. We know it's from the pit of hell. We know it's contrary to God's word. And then it is trumpeted by entities that operate in ignorance or a desire to live in falsehood, to not know the truth and be set free by it, but instead to be in bondage to a lie. And we see that among what we sometimes call the elite, the academia, the academic elite of our country. Not all, of course, but far too many are promoting a false narrative concerning Israel. This is fueling so much of the protest and the calls for Israel to be brought down, since it's supposedly an apartheid state, which it's not. That's just false narrative. Supposedly it's a white colonizer, and it's not. It's at least half brown to black, and it's never colonized that region. The last colonizer was Great Britain, and they pulled out, with the United Nations establishing a partition plan, which the Jews accepted and then had to fight for all these years to try to even live within that United Nations designated plan. So, no, there's no apartheid, there's no colonizing. These are false narratives, and Israel has to live underneath the pressure of them, and the Jewish people worldwide are often targeted or delegitimized or blamed along the lines of these false narratives. And it is disturbing how many are still wanting to believe a lie. That's the bottom line. I find you can't necessarily convince someone with the facts, but you can ask them, why do you want to believe what you believe? Why do you want to blame the Jews? What is it in you that makes you receive that kind of news and pass it on and yell at it through social media or whatever means you have? What is it in you that wants to blame the Jews or Israel? And maybe you start to get at the motivations and the real issues of the heart. And that's something Bridges for Peace is part of, part of the voice of truth and countering the false narrative that is so prevalent in our culture.
And I love to hear that, because as a Christian apologist, that's what I try to teach my students. And when I do have small lessons built into my shows, it's asking people why. Why are you believing what you believe? And how do you defend your faith, not only in the Bible, but say you don't believe in God, How do you defend that? And how much of that is reality versus narrative? Just like you're saying, these are false narratives. Obviously, this is a massive spiritual war that we are in. It's a war of the lies versus the truth. I think we're in a very dangerous point in history where lies, where the people with the microphones, they do not believe in God. They have a false narrative, and they have a lot of power as the gateway to information. I'm sure you have. What have you seen? Obviously, we all know about October 7th. Was it 7th or 6th that this horrific
It was the
thing?
7th. Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Happened. It was just a surprise attack, and I guess no one can really explain it. I'm not sure. I have my own ideas, but I'm not there, so I don't know. But have you been back since then? Have you been to Israel to see any of this destruction or what's going on in their culture?
I have not personally.
Okay.
I was last there in May last year.
Okay.
That was just after the ceasefire was established with Hamas. In April, early May, there was a lot of rocket fire out of Gaza by Hamas. My tour that I was leading then, that's one of the things I do, is get to lead study tours in Israel, other than being a part of the actual work in Israel from a distance. I'm a person who goes over and visits and pitches in. My work primarily is across the U.S. in raising awareness, raising funds, recruiting volunteers, all the things that help get the work done in Israel. So I don't get to Israel as much as I wish, usually once a year. And last for it was May, and that ceasefire was in place. So it's funny about ceasefires. We're glad as tourists that there's a ceasefire, because that's helpful, that there's not rockets coming down while you're trying to explore the land of Israel. Which, by the way, when it's not dangerous, it's very safe. Okay, kind of ironically, it's a very safe place.
Yeah.
It's just that there's times when it's not as safe, and that's this time we're in, sadly, for Israel particularly, and then for us who want to go over there, it's not as easy. But our tour guide, Stan Goodenough, was particularly intense as we toured the land of Israel. Right then, he talked a lot about the conflict. He seemed had this very heightened awareness of something. And I could look back, the moment October 7th happened, I could look back and realize, oh, he's really forerunning it. I mean, he just has the sense, the knowledge, maybe call it a prophetic sense, that a real outbreak is coming. And he even had said these words. Do you remember the political turmoil that's still there underneath the surface of Israel? But October 7th has changed things politically. Israel is not as divided and warring with each other. That was very pronounced. And Stan even said at the time, it's sad, but it's going to take a war to unite Israel and overcome their political divide. And that's exactly what happened. And so I've not been on the ground to see things personally. However, our team certainly has, and many reporting in to let the rest of us know firsthand what's going on. And let me add that our new national director for the U.S., Patrick Verbaeten, and his family were there. They've been there for 10 years. They were there at the outbreak of the war and several months following. And it was time for them to come back to the States because Patrick was designated to become the new U.S. director. So we have even our U.S. director now and family having lived through some months of this war, with a direct impact, in their lives of understanding. That's very helpful in us effectively leading the work in the U.S. as we support all the team in Israel.
I guess so. I think that's very interesting how you have this office where you begin to spread out and let people know who you are so you can get teams from the United States. Where do you go the most? Do you go to college campuses? How do you let people? I know it's word of mouth. You don't do any advertising. So how do you raise awareness here in the United States?
Well, we have an extensive volunteer network. I directed that network before stepping aside a few years ago to let a next generation come on, and they gave me a glorified title of Senior National Representative. I'm doing less with Bridges now than I was then, um, just just because I had a director role over the U.S. Previously, and so I know firsthand then though about how we get it done. To answer your question, we train and develop volunteers on three levels. One, and most importantly, is prayer. We have a prayer network. Do you know the Hebrew word chai? Chai might be the way to write it in English. Chai. It's
Hi.
the chai. Yes, it means life, or praying life into Israel. And it's also the prayer support base for this work. We don't presume we could get anything done without prayer. So we have thousands in our prayer network across the country. Uh, Often the people who pray are often the people who are ready to take action too. And so some of them turn into key contacts who are going to get our materials. Like, let's say, okay, maybe get a stack of these magazines
Hmm.
and spread them around your church or in the community. Because again, people aren't going to learn about us by a billboard or anything, but they are going to learn when one of our key contacts just spreads some information. And then those that really want to get involved take the path like I did, and that's to go to Israel, to our Institute of Israel Studies, and get trained. And that's a 2-week intensive training such that you come away able to represent Israel and represent this ministry, Bridges for Peace, and just speak on the topics, the issues of our time, and connect people to Israel. Do you know our tagline is Your Israel Connection? So it's called Bridges for Peace, Your Israel Connection. So that's just really what we do. We connect people to what God is doing in Israel, and then they'll start to do some amazingly important things, and that's pray, or they will give, or they will go to Israel, and they'll also stay informed through our updated publications. There's everything online coming to you as well through email and app and social media, and teaching letters come monthly. I'm a contributor here too. Our tour journal is an amazing resource that takes you through the land of Israel. This is a great resource just to study
That's
the
beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah.
study Israel from the standpoint of might you be going when you go on tour. But this is what we use for tour. And while I'm kind of pushing our products, let me just really encourage people to get a hold of this book. It's called Israel and the Church, God's Roadmap. I'm not sure if that's showing up clearly
It
enough.
is. It is.
Okay,
I
good.
wish I had those in a PDF so I could have put them up.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
really
sure.
nice.
And I could get you some. But I just wanted you to know that if somebody is saying, wait a minute, I need to understand these things better, this would be your resource right here. It's
That's
the key
beautiful.
aspects of, okay, what is Israel? What is Israel biblically, socially, politically, geopolitically? But otherwise, what's the church's responsibility and relationship? I wrote the chapter in this book on, which is a very painful chapter. It's Christian anti-Semitism. And
Mm.
that's something that I've tended to focus on, is the church's need to understand that historically, from the Jewish perspective, the church has been their persecutor. The church has been their oppressor. That is a historic reality. We don't want to believe, and I don't do believe that it's the body of Christ who loves Jesus has been their oppressor, but Christendom, the power center of a religion, worldwide religion, over the centuries adopted some very anti-Jewish stances, and the Jews understand us that way. That's pretty much what we are. Well, now, as Bridges for Peace and other ministries that are similar hearted, we get to come among this people, uh, serve a real need, and demonstrate to them who Jesus really is. And that's often just been missed. It's just they have a perception of a church organizationally that has nothing to do with them or hates them.
Yeah.
Now they get to find out, oh, but there's followers of Jesus who are very different than what we understood Christianity to be. So
Right.
this kind of book and dealing with difficult topics like Christian anti-Semitism are the kind of things that we try to help the church grow and understand in, so that they can bridge the gap, and God will bridge the gap as you're available to Him, between Christian and Jew. And so we build relationally in in areas and ways that often historically have not been, there's not been a relationship. That's often some pioneering work right there.
I can't tell you how important that is. During my doctorate studies, one of my research papers I chose as a different religion. I could have chosen anything. In fact, some of my classmates chose some really interesting, far out religions, but God has always given me a heart for for Israel, for the Jewish community. And so I visited a local temple. Do we call them temples, or
Well,
they're not
some are,
synagogues anymore,
yeah,
are they?
synagogue is a good general term, and
Okay.
some call their synagogue a temple.
Okay. And I interviewed two rabbis, not pastors, two rabbis, and one of them, he was more of an Orthodox rabbi, and we sat down and chatted, and he just told me that he would get bullied at it like Costco, and told he was the reason why Jesus was crucified. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing, that here we are 2,000 years later in the United States, and people are bullying rabbis in a place where you buy food and furniture and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would not, obviously he wouldn't wear his normal garb that he would wear in synagogue. But I thought that was very disturbing. So what you're doing is so needed. If anyone out there, you think, of course, people don't act like that. They do. And I'm just as shocked as anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go from around, or you are, I guess, do you hold lectures? Are you asked to come and speak at different churches? How does it work?
Yes, and mostly churches, other settings, other community venues, but we're mostly invited in to churches, and it's going to be more likely churches that are already interested and open
Mhm.
to Israel. Uh, I wish I could say we've made more progress among the churches that are not so interested and open, but churches, pastors, minister leaders, whatever they are, they know the type of thing they want in their church or not, and we're not going to force our way in. But
Mhm.
now and then, God gives us an amazing new inroad to a realm where maybe their theology has sidelined Israel. We don't want to be polarizing, by the way, around Israel. We're messengers of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I don't really get too upset if a church wants to stay so focused on the gospel that it doesn't embrace Israel. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would prefer them to be focused on the gospel. We don't have a need to come in and say, but let's add Israel to your thing. No, it's more likely that God is going to speak to the hearts of individuals within the body of Christ, and cause them to respond. You know what I'm saying? Think about your own congregation. I'm sure you have many different callings and burdens that people share, and maybe each one of them would want. Let's say somebody has a calling to the Bolivians, and they would love it if their church took up Bolivia, as their commitment. But they
Mhm.
probably won't. So they need to just be so enriched through the preaching of the gospel, the development of discipleship in their church, so that now as they respond to God on behalf of Bolivia, then they are all the more effective. Well, that's what we find we can do. We can mobilize all the more of the members of the body of Christ. This isn't something where we have to get a church to be our sponsoring church, or it doesn't work. No, it's usually if a church will just allow us the opportunity to have a seminar
Mhm.
in their church, then the people who have a heart will come out,
Yes.
and some of them will end up taking action on behalf of Israel. And that is mostly what happens. And now and then we're so pleased when a church leadership says, hey, let's make this ministry part of our missions plan. We love that too. But that's more the exception than the rule.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. There's a lot to think about when you're running a church, what to focus on, what might just have to be a seminar. And then, like you say, those who have a heart for it will step up and do whatever God's calling them to do, I hope. And okay, so backtracking, going to Israel and being trained. Now, is this on an internship program, or is it paid for, or do people pay for this themselves?
That's one thing. Maybe advertising would help us get as underwriters. We've never had the big money people come to Bridges for Peace. Very interesting. It is so grassroots. It is so well funded by small dollars that add up, and we serve 24,000 people a month with food, and so no, we're not funded for anything. Do you know when you bring your group to Israel and you volunteer to serve, they're going to tell you how much that costs. there's a cost.
Okay.
There's a cost to doing a service project, right?
Yes.
There's supplies and so forth. So the group will pay for their supplies to do a project. And at first I thought, well, that's crazy. Why can't we? Well, it's because people have given their money for everything else. And we use the dollars, back to the financial accountability. We use the dollars in Israel for exactly what the donor has said they want it to go to. And we have 26 about projects. And people say they want it for food, it's going to be food. Or they want it for home repair, which, by the way, we're doing a lot of in the devastated areas in that Gaza envelope. Home repair is going to go to home repair, and on and on and on. So volunteering is volunteering. You pay your way. All of our volunteers in Israel, the vast majority of all this work, these publications, you know what you're looking at here? You're looking at what volunteers have done, paying their own way to live in Israel. Now they get support. It's like any missionary type person.
Sure.
They can raise support to do it. But we have heroic people who just answer a call, and they go and they find out that God provides. And so I wish we were more funded. You mentioned, do we go on campuses earlier? That is another place we go. We have a young adult outreach called Zealous 8:2. In Zechariah 8:2, God says through the prophet Zechariah, I am zealous for Zion. With great jealousy, I am zealous for her. And so our young adult outreach, ages 18 to 30, captures that. And the reason I'm bringing that up now is that that is one of our internships, because you asked a minute ago, do we have internships? So yes, we have young adult internships. So 18 to 30, 11 months in country, serving and growing in discipleship, which includes going all over the land of Israel, learning and growing. Beyond touring. Touring is so good, but this is more like study in the land of Israel, and personal growth, and hands-on with the work. And then we have the institute that I mentioned earlier. That's 2 weeks, again, of paying your way, but you'll get trained in all the important things about Israel behind the scenes and meet the people. We do our best to connect our tour groups, our interns, our institute participants, and just visiting anyone. Connect them with the people we serve. It's so meaningful to be in the communities, among the people. Again, for us, it's all about relational building. That's why we just spend our energies on that, and you just don't find us on a big platform somewhere.
Right. Which, to me, I appreciate that, and getting to know the organization, that they are faithful with the money, and it doesn't go to advertising or big budgets paying the people at the top and then trickling it down. And by the time you get to the actual people in need, there's very little left to go around. So say that there are some young people watching, that they might be interested in becoming interns in this program, do they go to bridgesforpeace.com, and is there a tab for this,
sure
or how do they find it?
Yeah, 2 ways, really. Right at bridgesforpeace.com, there's Get Involved, and that'll drop down, and here's all the different ways. It might be tours, whatever people are interested in. Zealous 8:2 is what they're looking for. But there's also a Zealous website. So just, if you just remember Zealous, when you search Zealous, should be about the first thing that comes up is Zealous 8:2. Again, it's from Zechariah 8:2, in case anyone
Okay.
wonders, what is that? Why is that number there? But just
I
remember
like that.
being zealous for Zion with great zeal.
And that's showing your love for God. And
Mm-hmm.
okay. So we have internship programs, we have learning, in the short term, the 2 weeks. What do you see as the challenges right now for helping people in Israel as an American? Is there anything, these interchanges going on? It's been a difficult time for everybody in the last 4 years. So have you seen any new challenges come up?
Mm. There are always new challenges. Um, One of our challenges in the churches is just less access to the pulpit. We talked about having those seminars, but when we can speak to the whole church, that's a wonderful thing. Now, there's just one challenge that comes to mind is the American church has gotten all the more programmatic in ways that they know what their program is and they don't want to step outside of that. So a knock on the door from somebody like us isn't very likely to be answered because we don't fit their program. So that's a challenge. We need people who will say, I'll talk to my pastor and we'll talk about getting you guys in an appointment with our leaders so that how about even just a leader to leader training time. We have pastor leader training. Let's make us part of your professional development for your staff, things like that. We're not looking for your pulpit per se, but they always feel like they are. Or we're not looking for your missions budget. We're looking for relational connection to those that will respond. What if you were to say, I'd like some of my young adults to be discipled in Israel? That's a great thing.
Mhm.
Can you imagine what's going on right now? I mean, young adults have been there since about August last year. What's happened since August last year's war?
Yes.
Okay. Well, their parents wish they weren't there, but
Yeah.
they are extremely glad they are there. They're experiencing something in their life that will absolutely shape and transform them. They'll never be the same. They will have been in a nation at war helping, actually doing something real and demonstrating who Jesus really is at a time of utmost crisis among the Jewish people. So you can see how God would be working way beyond our thing. So this war is a major challenge that's come up. What's hard to do? It's hard to get people on tour to Israel right now. I have a tour planned for March coming up. I
Okay.
don't have, yeah, it's a great tour. It's a great plan. It's a great price. I could sell it to you, except you would probably be like most people. You would let me wait and see. Isn't there a war going on over there? I'm not
Yeah.
sure also. And I understand that. I'm not condemning anyone for not signing on when there's a war in a tiny country. Not too many people are going to Ukraine lately, are they? You
I don't
just
think they went before either.
okay. Um, it's kind of sobering. My wife and I just went to be with family in Switzerland, and it is sobering to think there is a war on this continent. It's the biggest war since World War II.
Hmm.
Uh, but that can't stop us. I mean, it's kind of silly. We're not going into the war zone, but we would be very hesitant to get a ticket to Kyiv, wouldn't we? Because they're under attack from the Russians. Okay, well, Israel is under attack from Hezbollah in the north, from Hamas in the south, which is still a very, painful and difficult fight, but now it's quieted down in the region because they don't get much opportunity to fire their rockets, or they don't get the opportunity to tunnel out and terrorize, or to float their incendiaries over and burn their fields. Hamas is being neutralized slowly. The hostages will be released eventually. Sadly, many it'll just be bodies that are returned home, I'm afraid.
Hmm.
Um, Iran is the big threat. In terms
Yeah.
of what's difficult, well, Iran is mobilizing its proxies from the ones we've mentioned to the Houthis in Yemen to Hezbollah as well in Syria, to Iranian-backed forces in Iraq. Um, all of this is making it difficult to get people to come to Israel. Not volunteers, by the way. A volunteer, or even like these young adults on Zealous, they just kind of understand. Oh, I'm called to this. This
Hmm.
is what I'm supposed to do. This will be. It will actually be fun. You know what I mean? Strangely, we humans, what we find fun. But when you have a real challenge and you overcome and you do it together, it's fun. It's fun in terms of meaningful, memorable, life changing. Okay, that's what I really mean by using that kind of flippant word. But you
Sure.
but you get the point that that's difficult to get people there on another basis of just touring to go and learn and come back home. But I'm hoping people that are viewing here and listening will consider, oh, is it am I really in big danger if Israel is welcoming me as a tourist? Won't they know how to take care of the tourist, because they have an interest in the tourist doing
Hmm.
well and being safe and not going into harm's way. So just keep that in mind for those that aren't just inherently stopped by there being a war, and instead think, what would God want to do in my life when I can actually have experienced a nation either at war? I hope by let's say March, when our tour goes, can we hope that this war is over? We really can, but we can't guarantee it, and I don't know what next could happen. Let us just consider how we would not just write off a country that needs us to come and help their economy. Think about COVID took such a hit on their economy.
Sure.
Now this war. Think of all those, including Palestinians. Thousands upon thousands of Palestinians benefit from tourism because they work in the tourism industry.
Hmm.
And so um, let's just try to think beyond our own comfort levels to what God would have us do in actually going to Israel.
So, you've mentioned that Bridges for Peace has feeds people. What other sort of activities does Bridges do to build bridges? And
Mhm.
I'm assuming that we're talking building a bridge between Christianity and Israel. Is that correct, or is there something else?
That's right. Essentially,
Okay.
between Christians and Jews. It means relationships built
Okay.
between Christians and Jews with a focus on Israel. Exactly. And yes, thanks for asking that. I've mentioned the food, and about 24,000 a month
A month.
receiving food. Um, let's think about home repair. Over 2,000 homes repaired. Often these are simply the substandard apartments that the new immigrants or the poor members of society, often these are Holocaust survivors or
Okay.
elderly from that era, are living in substandard conditions. Well, our teams come in and repair the homes. And our teams are, by the way, are known as the angels in Jerusalem and around Israel, because they actually clean
Really?
up. It's not a cultural thing there for a skilled workman to he comes in, he or she fixes, but they leave. They leave their mess from the construction. Well, our people clean up, so they're known as the angels. Well, we are in 23 communities with direct relationship there. They get ongoing, pallet loads of food and things like bar mitzvah supplies, holiday extras, like, at Passover and so forth,
Nice.
um, weddings. We supply extra, and we have a direct relationship with the mayor and the councils of that community, 23 of those again. We have 350 school kids that receive hot lunches daily. The schools in Israel, and of course the Jews, so prize their education. The Bible being a textbook in even the secular schools of Israel. Everybody is going to learn their Bible. It's your history. It's right in that book. And then others who truly believe in the God of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they'll be studying more. But what's the point? The school has provided the education, but the parents have to pay if the kids are actually even going to have textbooks or school supplies or
Okay.
hot lunches. And so here we are, just able to help not only provide that hot food, but those other things, even like taking a field trip. We're doing that. Well, what does that do? Is it puts our workers also in the schools doing projects and getting to know the kids and their teachers and the administrators and the parents. And so that's a real community impact work. It's called Feed a Child, and it focuses on schools. I'll mention this too. We help new immigrants, and that's our main reason to be giving aid, is to help the new immigrant get established in their new home. Now, Israel, with Jewish backing around the world, is doing this, of course. Israel is still the number one immigrant destination in the world on a per capita basis. So the Jewish agency is doing what I'm describing, except they welcome help. So for decades, Christians, through Bridges for Peace and other similar, just a few similar organizations, are directly helping the Jews come home from around the world. And one of the things we do, a lot of this food I'm mentioning is for them, but
Yeah.
also welcome gifts. When you're coming, say, with 2 suitcases from Ukraine, maybe 1 suitcase from Ukraine, you don't have much to set up your home. So we're actually supplying whole sets of pots and pans for your kitchen, and blankets. We've been outfitting complete apartments for a lot of these mothers and their children who have fled Ukraine, and where their husband father has stayed back to fight. They've come to Israel. They've made Aliyah, which is immigrating, and we've supplied their whole apartment with what they needed to live. A computer is just about essential equipment, and on and on,
Sure.
couches and beds and kitchen setup. So these are the ways we're helping. We've also helped over 100,000 Jews in coming home. In other words, out there in Ukraine, or the all the former Soviet Union has been our focus. We have
Okay.
helped over 100,000 of those Jews to actually be able to afford to leave where they are, so many living in poverty, get on a plane and come to the land of their fathers. So that's called Project Rescue. So
Oh, wow.
while we
Okay.
help them come home, we're mainly helping them when they get home. And that's all these other projects and many more than what I've just mentioned.
So, Project Feed a Child, it sounds like you're saying that Bridges for Peace actually goes into the school and prepares these meals, or do they just
Oh,
give vouchers for meals?
right. It is vouchers. By the
Okay.
way, by the way, anything with food and food preparation has to be strictly kosher, and we're not qualified to do that.
Okay.
We supply the food that is kosher certified, as in packaged foods, as well as fresh fruits and vegetables and all that. That's kosher, no matter how you look at it. Okay, so we supply all that. In the schools, we are simply providing the vouchers for those kids to afford the hot lunch. So we're not doing any food prep. When I say our
Okay.
people go in, we get invited in to be part of something the school is doing, because we're not just out there writing a check. We are Christians who care and want to build relationally, and they respond to that. We bring tour groups, for instance, to a school, go sit in classrooms and help the kids learn English, for instance, or maybe break out the paint and paint a building for them.
Hmm.
These are just ways that Christians get to be involved in the people's lives, and schools are one of those great opportunities.
Okay. Did you also mention that you all provide Bibles for the schools, or is that
Oh,
their normal textbook? Is it both Old and New Testament, or just the Hebrew Bible?
it's going to be the Hebrew Bible. We like to call it the Bible Jesus read, and
Yeah,
it talks a lot about him. He said it does. So we're glad we're handing out those scriptures. If we were handing out the New Testament as well, first of all, it wouldn't be received. We have to work within some limitations.
sure.
Individuals will want and receive the New Testament, but it won't be a organizational thing. Now, we're not bringing Bibles into the schools. It's all food and textbooks purchase, which will include Bibles. When Bibles otherwise are what we're providing in various languages for new immigrants. Often it's the first copy of the Hebrew scriptures that they've ever had. Uh, we
Wow.
have, we have speaking immigrants from South America, Central America. We have Russian speakers. Um, there's other languages that just aren't hitting my brain, but you can see that it's pretty special that when you think in terms of evangelism, there's different stages, and sometimes just because somebody is Jewish doesn't mean they know anything about or have truly laid hold of their faith. They
That's
just
true.
know they're Jewish, and culturally there's Christians like that around the world, right? They
Yes.
just know they're, well, I'm not Muslim. My family is Christian. We have crosses around the house. Okay, well, it could be very similar with the Jews. We are often their introduction to their faith and their opportunity to ask more, to go further in the ultimate knowledge of who their Messiah is.
So basically, what you in the schools you provide, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, the Tanakh, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay, so that's for
and
those
not
who don't know.
and
Go
and
ahead. Go ahead,
just to clarify,
Dr.
it's
Adams.
not that we're supplying Bibles to the schools.
Okay.
We are supplying vouchers for them to be able to purchase school supplies,
Oh, very good.
textbooks. Okay, but we are supplying Bibles to new immigrants.
Okay. Okay, that's good to clarify that. And then these are basically for people who have very little or nothing. Is that correct? I mean, there are
Mhm.
people in Israel who have the means because
Yes,
they have shops and they have
sure.
incomes.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, the poor you will have with you always, Jesus said.
Always.
And the implication is, what will you do about
Right.
that? How will you respond to the
Yes.
poor? There's about a 25% poverty rate in Israel. And a large part of that are the new immigrants. In America, we have the stereotype of the wealthy Jew. And because there's a lot of wealth in America, we're all pretty wealthy in America relative to the world.
Right.
So the Jewish community often knows very well how to generate wealth. A lot of the wealth we enjoy in America has been generated by Jewish understanding of how to build business,
Yep.
how to generate wealth, how to multiply. And so they pour a lot of their wealth into Israel because Israel is a very needy country. It is so small, and it is absorbing, as I mentioned before, more immigrants those who come are mostly poor, relatively, and they are having to defend themselves at a much higher level percentage of GNP in Israel is the highest in the world to defend just to defend yourself, just to survive. Think of the cost of mobilizing an entire populace into its military. Everyone right out of high school, male and female, have mandatory service. Who pays for that? The
Yeah.
government. How does the government pay for that? They tax heavily.
They
It's
tax.
it's a very high cost of a living in Israel.
Mm.
So when you combine these things, you have a portion of the society that isn't yet financially stable, the poor that you'll have always with you.
Yeah.
And here's the good thing. When we supply food and other aid, it might be a voucher to go to the dentist, or it might be a bus pass to be able to get to your language training, because when you come new to Israel and you can't speak Hebrew yet, you are poor. You can't go work. You can't go to college and learn until you can speak you're Hebrew and you have to go to Hebrew school. Hebrew school is provided, but you may need support for the family while you're not working and go into Hebrew school. There's
That's
doctors.
reality.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's just reality. So the poor are not permanently poor. We're not creating a dependency on us. We're helping them over a hurdle. And guess what? The next year or two, they will be contributing to building that economy that others can benefit from. Israel is
That's the way it
only
should
70
be.
something
Yeah.
years old, right? And it has
Mhm.
been at war its entire existence. It's a
Yeah.
very difficult financial management issue. How do you do that? Imagine if your household, your community was in that situation. You would have poor among you that need help. And that's where we get to step in and be that help.
And it's not crippling, was what I like, is it's not something they become so dependent on that they just sit back and know that they're going to be given a check every month, which is what our welfare system, unfortunately, turns into for many. Not
Mm-hmm.
all, but many.
Right.
Okay, we're just about out of time. So are there any last words? And let us know where we can find you, find the publications that you all have. I'd really like people to go and look into this, learn more, take it to your church, talk with your pastors about this, and see if we can spread the word about Bridges for Peace. And who knows, there might
Mm-hmm.
be someone in your congregation out there who really has this on their heart and really wants to help in some way, shape, or form. Or you have a young person who's ready to jump on this and get involved.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity and your own words, Catherine, just to help promote this, because it's such a rich, life-changing opportunity to be in Israel in any way, shape, or form, whether on tour or going to serve. And we just invite people to connect. 4 key words is connect, pray, uh, go, and give. If people remember that, connect to Israel. Hey, if it's not Bridges for Peace, just ask yourself at least, do you have a meaningful connection to Israel? God is working in Israel. He's bringing his people, Israel, home from the 4 corners of the earth. He's calling the church to be a part of this. And so, are you connected at all? Would just be the question I'll ask, our friends with us. Are you connected to Israel? Well, God is. You don't have to be this your primary calling, because maybe it is Bolivia, right? But are you connected to what God is doing in the earth? The whole church, I would say, should be aware of what he's doing in Israel because it's in the Bible. That's the thing. God has made a people for his own purpose. Ultimately, he's regathering them to prepare them to say in Hebrew, Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Jesus says, you won't see me again, Jerusalem, until you say this. What that means is the people Israel back in the land calling him home. So we work towards that day. And we invite people to connect to what God is doing in Israel. Again, bridgesforpeace.com is a great start. Go ahead and request, subscribe to the monthly teaching letter that comes. This is a Hebraically rooted, Jewish-minded understanding of the scriptures, which is what the scriptures are, a Jewish book, in case you haven't noticed. The Dispatch from Jerusalem, we've been holding up. Here's actually the latest edition. It's got a big scary lion on there. But these are actually talking about the voices in support of Israel. Yes, there are world leaders who understand and are supporting Israel's existence and necessity for being part of the nation, the community of nations. That's what's a feature in that. So we've mentioned that there's there's a weekly email. This is something we should really, really know. Go online, bridgesforpeace.com, and sign up for the weekly Israel news and prayer update. You'll get about 8 to 10 news items, actually accurate news. Here's what's really happening, and here's a scripture related to it and how to pray. So it is our High Prayer Network resource for prayer, and you can know that how to pray for Israel that way. So those are some of the ways to connect. I hope people will.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. God bless you.